items. If you would silence your cell phones, we'd appreciate that. Also, the way the agenda works is after we've done the roll call and approved the minutes from the last meeting, we take each agenda item one at a time. The first step is city staff presents on an item. Once they're done presenting on an item, it's open just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with those, we open it up to the public for comment and question. If you have something to say, we please ask that you step up to the microphone over there, state your name and address, and please try to keep your comments as close to the topic as possible. Once everybody who has wanted to speak has had the opportunity to do so, we close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion and usually a vote. With that, let's call the roll. Mina?
Thomas Voitek.
Here.
Kathleen Propp. David Borsick.
Present.
Ed Bowen.
Here.
Steve Cummings. Michael Ford.
Here.
John Hintz.
Here.
John Kiefer.
Here.
Robert Weigert.
Here.
Thomas Perry.
Here.
Andrew Mott.
Here.
Okay, moving on to the approval of the minutes from June 5th. Do we have any additions, corrections, et cetera, for those minutes? If not,
Motion to approve. Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion clearly passes. Let us move on to item number 1, zone change from neighborhood mixed-use district to neighborhood mixed-use district with plan development overlay and approval of a conditional use permit and general development plan for 4 duplexes and an 8-unit multifamily structure for property located at 129 West 17th Street.
Oh, Mr. Chair, we just want to make a brief announcement about, and we'll get to it when, number 2, design standards variance. That one's been pulled. We'll have some
All right.
comments on that one.
And number 3.
And number 3 has been left off on the agenda, which is the annexation.
All right. Back to number 1.
All right. So this was originally heard at the May 1st meeting of the Plan Commission where it was laid over. Here you have the site, it's neighborhood mixed-use zoning. This is the current land use map where we've got commercial with residential to the southeast and a little bit to the west, and then commercial to the west. Here you have an arrow. You can see there was the previous building on the north, along with the portion behind that burned and was subsequently removed, along with the paved area and the remaining green space to the south. Here's the current site plans. The applicant has changed their request a little bit. Originally, they were proposing an 8-unit building on the north, and the rest of the site was mainly shown as green space. Some of the concerns that this body had was, okay, what is the use of the rest of that property? So the applicant went back, took a look, and is coming forward now with a zone change to add the planned development, a conditional use permit for 4 duplexes, and then a general development plan only for the 8-unit building. So there is no specific implementation plan at this time. We were just talking about land uses and the general development plan. So it now includes that same 8-unit apartment building on the north with the 8 surface parking stalls, 8 garage spaces, 4 duplexes on the southern portion of the property, with each having an individual garage, plus 8 kind of visitor overflow parking areas for the duplex uses. So it's all on about 1.65 acres of property. In total, the 16 units being shown here is a density of about 9.72 units per acre, which is just slightly higher than what an SR9 zoning allowed. SR9 zoning allows a maximum density of 9.62 units per acre. This is at 9.72. So from a density, it's similar to what you would see with single-family residential. The main driving factor in that is that this zoning district has a relatively high green space requirement, which really limits the number of units they can functionally put on there. It has maintained its access off a 124-foot drive entrance at kind of the northwest corner of the property. The current drive entrance at the northeast property of the corner would be removed and revert back to green space and curbing. That drive access then accesses the surface and garage parking for the 8-unit buildings and the garage and surface parking for the multifamily or the duplex development. Stormwater management plans have not been submitted at this time, as this is the general development plan. They have not flushed out all of their stormwater management practices for this property that will have to be addressed during the SIP. Landscaping, the applicant has provided a general landscaping plan Again, as this is a GDP, it is not a finalized landscaping plan. They will have to bring that back during the SIP. The applicant is kind of intending to do this as a two-phase development. Phase one would be getting the apartment built and leased, and then begin phase two of the product. So here's that generalized landscaping plan. It does include a variety of street trees and perimeter landscaping to meet the code requirements, but it is not finalized. We have not done a full review of it at this time. No photometric plan has been provided. Signage plan is the same as our original development, about a 3-foot 11 tall by 10-foot long monument side that would meet the NMU district standards. So this is the floor plans for the development. This is the 8-unit building on the top, showing kind of would be 4 and 4 on the 4 units first floor, 4 units second floor. Then they have some elevations showing of the garage of what the garage would be, that 8-unit garage building. Here are the revised elevations for the 8-unit building. Again, as this is a GDP only, the elevations would not be finalized. That would be taken care of the SIP, but this is the current revisions. They've removed kind of the hipped roof and went to more of a flat roof to mimic that older portion of the building. So this is kind of the current concept design for the multifamily building. And these are some conceptual renderings for the duplex units. The owner has built similar units elsewhere in the city and is thinking about a similar product here. So staff is recommending approval of the zone change to add the planned development. Approval of the conditional use permit for duplexes. The duplexes in this district do require a conditional use. And then approval of the general development plan, including a base standard modification for the 8-unit apartment building.
Thank you, sir. Technical question. Ed?
Are the 8 parking stalls, those visitor parking stalls, are those required under code, or is that just a convenience amenity?
It's a little bit of convenience and a little bit of finalizing the duplexes. The duplexes generally would require 2 spaces per unit,
Okay.
so it's a little bit of kind of overflow parking if needed.
Because I mean, normally you'd have, I guess, if in a single-family arrangement, you'd have 2 stalls within the garage.
Yep, and then
which would
2
be and then 2 theoretically in the
in your
driveway.
driveway.
I'm just
Right.
wondering if those stalls are
Yeah. They don't
necessary.
They don't really have the quote-unquote driveway stalls you would normally have because of the access
Oh, yeah,
drive
you're
going
okay, yeah.
through.
Because the access drive goes right up,
Goes
okay.
right
So
through.
there is no driveway.
There's no-
Those garages go right out to
Yeah.
the,
So
Got
they've
it.
kind of done that same 2 per and moved them to more of a centralized parking because
Got
you
it.
don't have that driveway, traditional driveway.
got it. Thank you.
David?
2 questions. One, is there any concern with the duplexes to the rear and only having one driveway to access the 17th? I think it was of safety considerations. And then the second is, excuse me, the SIP review, does that come back here or is that staff?
Nope, SIP review comes back to you and council.
Okay, oh, and I lied, there's a third question. Is there, the landscaping, is there a transitional yard landscaping requirement? Is that included in this?
They're showing transitional yard landscaping. There is a transitional buffer yard requirement. I cannot tell you if what they're exactly showing here is their concept landscaping would meet it, but they will have to meet the buffer yard requirements.
As for the emergency service provider, as this goes through the internal review processes, police and fire are notified, and not police or fire had any concerns.
They did not weigh in about a single access point at all as being a concern.
Thank you.
All right, technical John?
For the part, you see how they, on the southwest corner, there's that, where it jogs out for that little bit right there? Right above that, there are 2 residential properties that abut where that driveway's going through. Do we require fencing for where that drive comes up through there, or no?
Go back to
You see the two properties that, the
Here.
residential properties that abut where that driveway is gonna keep going back.
Yep, this would have to meet buffer yard requirements if it's a separate zoning district. And I don't think I have a zoning map in here. I think those are SR9, so they will have to meet a buffer yard requirement. So buffer yards can be done one of two ways: distance plus landscaping or fencing plus landscaping.
So there will
With
have
that
to,
tight access drive, in all likelihood, there'll be required fencing plus landscaping.
okay, thank you.
Or as part of the review, you can require a fence.
Correct. During the SIP, we could require additional fencing if this body saw.
Yeah, I understand this GDP, I was just asking for the,
Yep.
for the future.
All right, other technical questions, folks? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item, and please again step up to the microphone and state your name and address. Thank you. Come on up, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Mackey. I live at 122 West 17th Avenue, pretty much directly across the street from former Timbuktu VFW building. And I have a question first, if I could, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask the commission. What does SIP stand for?
Specific implementation plan.
Okay, and explain that to me, bro.
So our plan developments are broken into two pieces: a general concept development plan,
Right.
which is what they're seeking now, and then a specific implementation plan where they have to bring in finalized plans of what they'd like to construct, and it's reviewed for compliance with the lighting ordinance, the zoning ordinance, the landscaping ordinance, the sign ordinance, all of those finalized details.
Perfect, thank you very much, I appreciate that. The other thing I'd like to ask a question, if the commission gives an affirmative approval and this thing then moves to the city council, the property owner then cannot make a change and then decide to put in 6 duplexes or 5 duplexes. That would have to come back here, right? And with the 8-unit apartment building, if they wanted to change it to 6 or to 4 or something like that, they'd still have to come back here. Any deviation from the specifics of the 8 apartments in the one building or the 2 units, the 4 2-units, right? All has to come back here, correct? Okay. And there's no timeline. In other words, they could do the 8-unit apartment building and then sit on the property for 5 years before they even decide to do anything further, right? So there's no timeline. Okay. All right. I'd also like to point out that on the first page of the Planning Commission staff report, under property location and type, a sentence that reads, "The site previously contained a commercial bar with an attached multifamily dwelling." That building has never had a multifamily dwelling. The attached part was a banquet hall with a kitchen. There was never a dwelling in that attachment.
The assessor records had indicated that there was some multifamily units.
But as long as it was ever a bar, it was a banquet hall. And if it had a dwelling, it would have been way before, back so long time ago.
Darren, was
That's
that
not
pertaining
make
to
sure
the
that-
upstairs being residential? Not the back attachment, but the upstairs was the residential part, is that what that's pertaining to?
Yes, that's what.
Yeah, our assessor, when I checked back through the old assessor records, it listed residential units for the
I
building.
just want to say, in the upper level of that building was kind of a lounge for the VFW people, and then it became kind of a lounge for the, and the banquet hall became an unlawful indoor smoking facility, which is why the building burned down.
Okay.
So, because I happen to live across the street from it, and
I can-
anyway,
I can
the other
follow up
thing-
and make sure we update those records are correct.
I have no personal objection to the 4 quad units that are being proposed. I think that that's within the neighborhood of single-family and 2-family units. I think that's great. I mean, I know the contractor and I know the property owner from the standpoint of the work that they've done. Their work is good, there's no question about that. My objection lies with the 8-unit apartment building. That 8-unit apartment building is not in compliance with the rest of the neighborhood, and that's the reason they're here, trying to get that change so that they can do this. The building's 66 years old. It's been vacated since the fire, and it's abandoned with windows that are broken out, windows or places where air conditioners were taken out. It's been just, I watched the birds flying in and out and all this other stuff. It's really a structure of questionable value. So, I mean, and then to take that structure, and I believe that the very first meeting in May, one of the people on the commission referred to the initial designs of trying to take a football and a basketball and put them together and still call it a ball. It's not. It's an ugly building. I mean, it was beautiful in its day, but it's an ugly building today. And I don't care what you do unless you can absolutely match the design of the structure, brick and all that other stuff all the way around. It's not going to look right. And I have to look at it. That's what's going to happen. And the last reason I have an objection is, I think that one of the things that says in here that there will not have an impact on the neighborhood. Well, the neighborhood already is impacted from the standpoint of traffic, and adding additional traffic, even though the parking is adequate parking in the structure, there's still going to be additional traffic for the people going and coming from those residents. And consequently, on any Friday night or Saturday night, 17th Avenue between Doty and Oregon is a one-lane street. Because of the cars parked on both sides, it's a one-lane street. It's barely wide enough for a fire engine to get down, let alone two cars to try to duck in and out of other driveways so that they can pass. So I don't think that the density of putting an 8-unit apartment building in there is going to be, it's just going to bring in too much traffic, and it's going to be a problem. So, like I said, it's an unattractive building. It's a change from what the neighborhood is with single-family and multifamily units, two-family units, and it is going to impact the neighborhood. It's going to bring into that. So that's my objection, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening. Thank you.
All right, who else would like to speak to this item? Up to the microphone, state your name and address, please. Come on up, sir.
Hello, my name's Richard Pollock, and my wife and I, we bought the house that's right next door, over there,
119.
119, that's correct. We bought that house, so obviously our biggest concern is going to be privacy. We're getting in all these new neighbors, and right now, currently, there's a chain link fence in the backyard. And then there's a small fence that goes along our driveway, but it's falling apart. Both our bedroom and the nursery is located on the west side. So obviously there's going to be concern about the noise too, with the construction and, all of the development. So, we really have no problem. We know that the area is going to eventually be developed. But, with the privacy, that's going to be a big concern, So we're hoping that maybe when they build this, that they can maybe, build some taller fences, to give our family more privacy.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
My name is Mike Kroll. I live at 1732 Doty Street, and I am opposed to the eightplex also. That is not standard in our neighborhood. I'm just going to leave it short and simple.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
My name is Steve Pierce. I'm speaking on behalf of my dad, Ed Pierce, who's ill. He lives at 1725 Doty Street. He just wrote out a thing. He said, "You people on the planning commission would now want an apartment building in your backyard. This has been a peaceful neighborhood, low crime rate." Now, he's lived there 70 years. This house has been in my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my dad, and then mine. So you go ahead and you put low-income housing in there in the backyards, it's just going to change. Who's going to handle paying the difference in the property values? Is the city going to offset the difference? He's not that sure. He's worked too many years to make it a nice area. And he just said, if it's not right for us to lose money, why would a third party be making money out of it? It's kind of got me on edge too, because I plan on retiring there. So, and I know the gentlemen that are, planning on building it. Good guys, no complaints there. This is an old neighborhood. Isn't there a bunch of other places to be put in apartment complexes? I don't know. I mean, you know, and I guess that's about all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Come on up, ma'am.
My name is Katie Peschel. I'm at 112 West 17th, almost directly across the street. I agree with most of what has been said about from my neighbors. I am an objection as well, just because it's not zoned that way, and it's increasing it 4 times what's currently allowed, which is, in my opinion, not fair. No one else would be able to do that. So there's that aspect, as well as the traffic and the parking, turnarounds in the driveway, and I just think owner-occupied housing would be best for the neighborhood.
Okay,
Thank you.
ma'am. Anyone else is here to speak to this item today? Come on up.
My name is Laura Kroll. I live at 1732 Doty Street, also across the street from the property there on Doty. I also grew up at 1721 Doty Street, and I've been in the neighborhood for about 35 years, and I'm opposed to this as well. Also for the same reasons everybody else is opposed. And I kind of wonder why a conditional use is needed. What's the hardship for it?
Anyone else? Going once? Twice? Okay, public comment is closed. It's back to the commission for discussion. Who would like to start us off? David?
General question is the owner's rep is not here.
They're here.
So if we have questions, we could bring them up?
I don't see why not. Just also clarification, this is not low-income housing, correct?
Correct.
Market rate? Correct. Okay. Other thoughts from the commission? Questions? Opinions? Ed?
I will, I guess, share mine because I sort of caused some problems for the petitioner on this one last time in terms of my view of the architecture and some of the other stuff. But I will say that I do think that they've made an effort here to at least try to be a little bit more sensitive to what the existing design is and how how they can carry that over into a new product. So it doesn't look quite as jarring, I think, as it did the first time that I saw it. So, that concern is probably alleviated on my end a little bit. In terms of the base standard modification to increase the density, I do think that there is a case to be made here because of just how out of the ordinary the parcel size is. Dealing with almost a 2-acre parcel, or between 1.5 and 2 acres in a neighborhood like this is relatively uncommon. And we as a city, we as a plan commission have talked a big game about urban infill type development and how we can provide quality new housing options to people of all income levels in all of our existing neighborhoods. And while I certainly don't want to dismiss the concerns of the property owners and the neighbors around it, I think that this is something that dovetails with what the city's been trying to do in terms of that urban infill type redevelopment. I think this site lends itself to it. And I think given what the alternative could be in terms of the increased density here up to, I think the first plan we saw was 20-some units or something like that. So I think that this one is a little bit more sensitive to the existing neighborhood. So I think I've gone from a surefire no on the original proposal to this to probably a yes vote on this. So
Thank you, sir.
speak my piece.
I have,
Bob?
the comment was made about this being low-income rentals. I have not heard that from the,
We just confirmed it's not. It's
it's
not.
not. Okay. That's, I just want to be aware of that.
Other thoughts? Yes.
Quick question for the, for the city. So this would, currently it's zoned up to 4 units, correct? So this would change it to allow the 8-unit space?
I steal the book.
It's,
Yeah. So through the conditional use process in the neighborhood mixed-use zoning, which it is, you could build a 4-unit apartment building via conditional use.
Okay.
Because they want to take that from a conditional use for 4 up to an 8-unit building. That's triggering the need for the PD with the base standard.
Okay. Okay, so I'm curious, just given what the public testimony was, the city's basis for concluding this wouldn't change the character of the neighborhood or have an adverse impact on the character of the neighborhood?
We looked at it generally from, as Mr. Bowen kind of alluded to, the parcel size and the true density of what you're getting at basically 9 units per acre, a little over 9 units per acre, not being that far different from what single-family development is.
Okay.
if you looked at it from that aspect, we just ran some numbers. I mean, based on the parcel size you get approximately, and this is the max based on, just based on density, based on the size, 59 potential units there based on the parcel size. That would never happen in reality because you could never develop it and meet your stormwater requirements. But what that 59 units works out to, if you're doing 3 and 4 units a building, about 14 buildings of 4 units apiece.
The applicant's proposing considerably less than what the NMU zoning could allow you to do.
So what could happen is, if they go the other route, say the zoning's not approved and we're sitting with an NMU zoning, you could come back and request a conditional use permit for a number of
Or
townhouses at 3 to 4 units, multiplexes at 3 to 4 units, and apartments at 3 to 4 units, under a conditional use back. So,
Can you restate exactly what you said, Darren? We'll do it.
Repeat it word for word with the
Back to
microphone.
David.
It seems that at the workshop or a previous meeting, that there's some discussion, in addition to residential, could there other uses be in this property?
yeah, let Mark handle it.
yes, so under the current NMU zoning, this could be a wide variety of commercial uses under neighborhood mixed-use zoning. Professional, personal services, any type of retail. Commercial retail would be permitted on this property. Apartments with limited commercial, so you could do a first floor commercial with apartment units above it. You could do mixed-use buildings with a mixture of other commercial and residential. So there are a significant amount of, in the permitted uses section, commercial uses, then moving into conditional uses, restaurants, bars, and taverns, drive-throughs and in-vehicle sales and service, so that's fast food restaurants, gas stations. Vehicle sales is a conditional use, vehicle service and repair is a conditional use, light industrial is a conditional use within this district. So NMU is a mixed-use district that allows various commercial and residential options.
And NMU's our old, what was it, C1 district, which was a neighborhood commercial district.
And just the reason that even under permitted uses, there could be perhaps a higher impact use in this property.
Which wouldn't require us to review it.
That is
Yeah.
correct. That is correct. So, and then I will agree with what Ed's comments were regarding that. That really what we've been encouraging is infill development within the city. And if I heard you correctly, the density is within 1/10 of what the formula is, or 1/100th. What was it? Not.
It's 1/10 different from what SR9
Yeah.
density would allow.
So I mean, it's that's not even a rounding error to. So I compliment what the developers wanted to do. I think that it meets the needs of the community as well as minimizes the impact within the neighborhood. Now, I'm gonna support that.
All right, other thoughts, questions, commentary? John?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to what Ed was saying too, because there was a concern of traffic, and I'm reading this correctly, we're gonna have eight apartments and 8 residences in the duplexes. So that's 16 residences. If you have 2 vehicles per residence and they're all leaving at once, then you would have a max of 32 vehicles leaving or coming in at any one time. But the odds of that happening with residences and people working different shifts and so on and so forth, that's, as far as that, the traffic going in and out, it's not like it's a business. It's a residence. I don't know how many people are taking off and leaving multiple times per day, but I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue. 17th, yeah, that's an issue, but that's not us. That's the Traffic Review Board. They're the ones who have to get 17th under control.
All right, any other thoughts, or do we have a motion coming soon?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Gorsick,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Perry,
Nay.
Mott,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-1.
Okay, items number 2 and 3 have been withdrawn. Do you have any comment on number 2? Because we
I
had
was gonna say a couple of
discussed it on.
reasons for us on number 2.
We put a PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
No.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For item 2, many of you will recall that at the last Plan Commission meeting, a petitioner came to us asking for a design standards variance to allow a rear addition using materials that were different from the main building at 914 East Murdoch. The site there again in blue, we showed this before. Kind of showing an aerial of it. The enclosure itself, you can see it's on the north side of the building there, and that has stayed the same, the location of it. What I'll show you is some difference in materials. So you can see up there on the left, both the west and the east walls of that enclosure would be block, just like the existing building. So that is actually consistent with the material that the existing building is, and what they do with the center there is put a roll-up door in there to allow access to the oven that they'd be putting in that enclosure. You can see a plan on the right there. Just showing where it would go again. A lot of you have seen these photos before. Again, another angle looking towards the building there. Showing the oven on the right there, that would go in that addition. And basically for this, we no longer feel it needs a design standards variance. It would just be something that we as staff can approve administratively. We would still take it through site plan review and make sure that it conforms to everything else, in terms of ordinances.
Got it.
Basically, we want to show that they came back, they made adjustments, now they're now compliant with the code, so we don't need to move forward anymore.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Item 3's been withdrawn, the annexation at this time.
Okay, now moving on to item number 4, final plat for the creation of a 24-lot, single-family residential subdivision at the north 3300 block of West 9th Avenue, Pickard Estates, Phase 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, the petitioner is requesting approval of a final plat consisting of 24 single-family lots identified as Pickard Estates Phase 1. On April 10th of this year, the Common Council approved the site's located approximately 350 feet east of Clairville Road, and was attached to the city in February of 2018. When it attached to the city, it was given a zoning designation of SR5. That's a single-family residential district. And the surrounding area has a mix of uses, including sporadic single-family uses along West 9th Avenue, agricultural lands to the south, east, and west, and vacant wetlands to the north. This is a copy of the preliminary plat that was approved in April, and it does outline the proposed Phase 1 area of this dark line here. And here's a copy of, or an image of the final plat. The final plat is utilizing 18.5 acres of area, and again is being proposed to be platted with 24 single-family lots and 4 outlots. The proposed lots range in size from 11,000 square feet in size, which is about a quarter acre, to 37,500 square feet in size, which is 0.86 acres. All of the proposed lots meet the minimum zoning requirements of the SR5 district. And then looking at the overall density of the development, the density is very low, coming in at 1.3 units per acre. But due to two very large outlets and 2 additional outlets being included in the plat, the densities could be viewed as artificially low. The outlets account for 44% of the land area of the plat. Now, the 4 outlets that are included is Outlot 1, which is at the southeast corner of the development, which will serve as a small stormwater detention pond. And we have Outlot 2, which is essentially, Outlot 2 is along the north side, which is can be used to allow stormwater to discharge into an open channel along the north side of the property and then flowing east to Clairville Road. Outlot 3 is the central one, and that's going to be used for development of a larger stormwater detention pond. And then lastly, Outlot 4, which is located about 2/3 of the way down and centrally located on the property. And that is proposed to be dedicated as parkland to the city. Let's see. A little closer up view. Everything in white is part of the proposed plat. The plat includes a new street network. The main entrance coming off of West 9th Avenue is Paul's Place, and it heads north and starts to curve around to the west. We have Mary's Drive, which will provide access to the park that will be dedicated to the city. And then we have Roberts Drive and Jimmy's Drive, which head towards the east. I'll go back to the air photo here. And that's in anticipation, if this parcel here, which is still in the town, the future of this parcel is still unknown. We don't know how it's going to develop. It's currently owned by a church. But in case the church decides to sell their land, there is that potential to develop that residentially. And then that land would be incorporated into this subdivision. Both the city police and fire departments have reviewed the final plat and have not indicated any problems servicing the area. And as well, the Oshkosh Area School District has been notified and has not responded with any concerns about being able to accommodate the additional population. The Department of Public Works has reviewed availability of city utilities, and there's city sewer and water just to the east of the development. The developer will be required to attach onto this city's water main and sanitary sewer. The Department of Public Works and city staff is working with the developer to prepare a developer's agreement for construction of the utilities and street construction. The agreement is nearing completion and must be finalized prior to being approved by the Common Council. Various engineering plans, including water, grading, drainage, sanitary sewer, paving, and stormwater plans have been submitted for Phase 1. And again, the developer is working closely with the Department of Public Works on finalizing the designs, which also need to be approved prior to Common Council approval. A declaration of protective covenants, conditions, and easement restrictions for the subdivision have been submitted. That's been reviewed by the city attorney. It looks like that is ready to go. And again, that is a requirement for Common Council approval. As far as the parkland dedication, the parkland dedication equates to 66,000 square feet of land area, which meets a 1,100 square foot requirement for every newly platted lot in the preliminary plat. The Parks Department is requiring the land dedication versus payment in lieu of, as this area of the city is really lacking in park and recreational space. The preliminary plat did indicate a larger park, which was originally sized at 72,333 square feet. The city was planning on buying an additional 6,333 square feet to add additional parkland, but unfortunately, the developer and the city cannot reach a agreed upon price for the land. The final plat street lighting plan has been conditionally approved by the electrical division. There's just some minor revisions that need to be changed on the final plan prior to common council approval. And also a terrace tree plan has been submitted, and the proposed locations meet subdivision regulations. The plan does show that half the trees, or 34 trees in total, places a species named autumn blaze maples, and then the other half as Redmond lindens. In our zoning ordinance, we classify autumn blaze maples as a species to be used sparingly due to overplanting of that particular tree. So the city forester has been notified, and there is a note on the tree plan that the city forester does have final say on tree planting species and locations, so that can be adjusted prior to planting. With that, staff is recommending approval of the 24 lot Pickard Estates Phase 1 with 6 conditions, 2 of which have been added after the staff reports went out. First one stating that the developer's agreement for the subdivision shall be finalized as approved by the city staff prior to common council approval. The second one, the declaration of protective covenants, conditions, easements, and restrictions for Pickard Estates shall be approved by city staff prior to common council. Then all water grading, drainage, sanitary, storm sewer, and paving plans shall be approved by DPW prior to common council. And then the street lighting plan shall be approved by the electrical division prior to common council. And then lastly, the 2 that we added, there's some general notes that are missing on the final plat, which is usually standard language on our final plats. One, all required easements shall be included on a final plat for approval by the Department of Public Works. And then a second note, all municipal easement, all required notes shall be included on a final plat per the Department of Public Works. Those are notes that include references to grading drainage plans shall meet, the lots grading drainage shall meet the approved plan. Just notes like that are generally placed on our plats. So with that, I guess that's it.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions, David?
Just so I'm clear, the gap between lot 1 and or outlot 1 and outlot 2 as a proposed roadway?
In the future, in a later phase, yep, this little gray area is not part of the plat.
All right, I have a question, then just to clarify, the park, what they're designating for park meets what the city requires, or?
Yep, the outlot 4 size at 66,000 square feet, which is what's required.
Okay. Other technical questions? All right, seeing none, anybody here from the public to speak to this item today? Going once? Twice? All right, 3 times, nobody wants to speak. Public commentary is closed. Back to the commission for discussion and a vote.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion?
We just need to say as
Oh.
amended? or-
Oh, as amended?
As amended.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you, David. Your years of experience helps out there. All right, let's call the roll.
Say used?
Orsick,
Yeah,
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Heaver,
Aye.
Weigart,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Boytek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, on to item number 5. Street name change, Emmers Lane change to Northwest Haven Drive from Highway 21 to Omro Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So this one is pretty straightforward. It's just renaming the segment of road that is known as Emmers Lane, basically from runs perpendicular to Omro Road down to Highway 21. It's about 900 feet long. There's 4 properties affected by the name change. Choice Bank actually is the petitioner. They came to us a few months back, and they have a new headquarters opening up at 1041 Emmers Lane there. And they felt that this name change would benefit them in terms of helping their customers because more people are aware of North West Haven Drive versus Emmers Lane as a street name. They also thought that it would benefit emergency services in terms of going out there. And it would simplify the current naming scheme because right now we have 3 name changes within like a quarter mile. Basically it goes from Northwest Haven, then it goes to Emmers Lane, and then Kiwani Street, which is in Algoma. All of Northwest Haven Drive and Emmers Lane would be in the city of Oshkosh limits. North of Omro Road there where Kiwani Street is, that's in Algoma. So basically what we did was we had the petitioner work with us. They actually created the narrative in a petition and they went to the surrounding property owners and got their buy-in on this. All the property owners approved of it. Only one did not want to sign a petition, but that person said that they would not hold up the process. So it seemed like pretty much everybody was on board with it. We contacted the county and they seem okay with it because the range of addresses will remain the same. The city's police department did not weigh in on it as far as I'm aware. The fire and addressing departments approved the proposal. So we as staff basically recommend approval of the street name change as requested.
Thank you, sir. Technical questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
Sure. I'm John Glenn with Choice Bank, 1041 Emmers Lane. I'm just going to echo what you said. I couldn't have said it any better. My understanding is that Emmers Lane was just annexed earlier this year, so it seemed to make a lot of sense within the city of Oshkosh for consistency to come off of Northwest Haven straightforward. So, like you said, we talked to all the property owners. They seemed to agree that it made a lot of sense. Prior to this year, I don't think you could have done it because of Algoma having a piece of it. So I appreciate your consideration.
All right, thank you very
You
much.
bet.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, call the roll.
Forsick,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Boytuck.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
On to item number 6, conditional use permit request to establish an outdoor storage use at 320 East Furno Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the subject site is located at the northwest corner of East Furno Avenue and Moser Street. It is 2.75 acres in size. It is located in the North Industrial Park and is being used for brick and machining. The surrounding area is predominantly industrial uses. So here's a view of the subject site. The petitioner is requesting approval of a CUP to use a portion of the existing parking area to the east of the building for storage of skids and pallets. And this area will exceed 500 square feet in area, and that's why a CUP is required. Here's the site plan. So the outdoor storage area will be about 2,700 square feet. It will be resurfaced with concrete and enclosed with 8-foot tall gray privacy slatted chain link fencing. There will still be about 40 feet of drive aisle between the storage area and the landscaped area, so it should not affect vehicle circulation. Staff is in support of the proposed outdoor storage use, as the use should not be detrimental to the surrounding area, provided the required solid 8-foot tall screening is installed around the storage area. Staff is recommending that additional shrubs be installed in the grassed area right here fronting Moses Street to kind of break up that solid fencing. And here is an example of what that proposed solid screening will look like. And staff recommends approval of the proposed CUP for an outdoor storage area with the conditions that the outdoor storage area must be completely enclosed by 8-foot tall solid fencing and additional landscaping be installed in grassed area fronting Moser Street as approved by the Department of Community Development.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions from the commission? Seeing none, anyone from the public here to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? We'll call the roll.
Forsick,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Boytuck.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Item number 7, conditional use permit and general development plan for a multifamily development located at the northwest corner of West 6th Avenue and Oregon Street, commonly referred to as the Morgan District.
Just a moment.
No problem. We got all day.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a conditional use permit, it's actually 2 conditional use permits in one, and a general development plan for a multifamily townhome development on the Morgan District property. Here we have the current land use area. Obviously, this is presently a largely vacant site. Previously, there was Oshkosh truck stored there. Prior to that, we have the Morgan Door Geldwin facilities that were historically located on this property. To the south and west of it, we have a mixture of a TR10 single and 2-family residential area. North, we have obviously the river. In the east, we do have the commercial corridor along Oregon Street. So here is an aerial of the subject property. Again, you can see those historic commercial buildings have been removed from the property. I should say industrial buildings have been removed from the property, and it's largely at this time a vacant site. So this is the current concept plan from the developers as they are seeking the general development plan. So the site needs a conditional use permit. Apartments and townhomes are both only permitted in the Riverfront District as a conditional use. Then they are seeking the general development plan because this is currently zoned with a planned development overlay. So they're currently indicating 4 5-story apartment buildings that have ground floor parking with 4 units of residential above them. It also includes a pool area and a clubhouse common space use as well. Then 6 townhome buildings ranging from 5 to 7 units. Units within the multifamily building range anywhere from about 600 square foot single 1-bedroom or efficiency units up to 1,480, almost 1,500 square foot 3-bedroom units. Market demand is going to drive the final mixture of those unit counts, and the applicant can expound on that a little bit. They are proposing a phased development of this. They would not intend to build out the entire development at one time. Kind of in the grayed out area would be subsequent phases, with the initial phase consisting of drive access to apartment buildings and that clubhouse pool area. They will have to come back, obviously, through the specific implementation plan process for those others. So the development is proposed to be accessed off of 2 private drives, one accessing off of Iowa and one off of West 6th. Currently, they do show a second access drive into these townhome developments. Discussion with Department of Public Works, there is concern with proximity of these 2 access drives. And during the subsequent phases in SIP, we would probably look to have this one removed just because they're a little too close together. Ultimately, during the SIP, we'll also look to have this slightly reconfigured. Right now, it's a little wider than the Minnesota Street roadway that it lines up with. There is not a concern with kind of the dual lane of 1 entrance, 1 exit. We would like to see it, though, narrowed up, though, so it closely matched what a street width would be, just to avoid kind of some of the conflict that could come with that split drive entering at such a wide width. But those are items that we can be addressed during the SIP final layout of these properties. The applicant is proposing about 288 parking spaces for this development. The code would require a total of 440, just for the apartment complex portion with the 4 apartment buildings are showing about 288 parking spaces between the 31 in each building, plus the overflow surface parking. Code requirement would be 440, so they are underparked at this time. The applicant does believe there is rationale there for a base standard modification to reduce their required parking. At this time, staff is not recommending a base standard modification to reduce the parking, but understands there is some discussion to take place of whether or not that is appropriate between the applicant, the Plan Commission, and definitely be addressed as part of the specific implementation plan. A couple of other items of note. The Riverfront Mixed Use District requires a maximum setback of 45 feet. As these buildings are currently laid out, about the only one that may meet it is this building. We have not been given specific setback standards at this time. but in all likelihood, a base standard modification is going to be needed, as just the topography and geology of this site has necessitated that they move them back a little bit. So they would need that base standard modification during SIP to exceed the 45-foot maximum setback. No stormwater management plans have been provided at this time, as we are just doing a general development plan and the applicant is working through the concept only. I will note that only a portion of the larger site is proposed to be developed this time. The applicant is reserving the corner for commercial development and the northwest corner for possibly future multifamily development in the future. Conceptual landscaping plans have been provided. This is what we have. It shows kind of a mixture of sub-street and yard trees. A full landscape plan will be required that meets all city standards during the specific implementation plan. So getting a little bit into the floor plan. So this, you can see the 31 space first floor parking area. It also then does have some units on the very end that would be facing the riverfront. This is what a conceptual second through fourth floor layout may be, a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units. Within the 5th floor, encompassing the remainder portion of the units, anywhere from 1 to 3 bedroom units. So they did provide a parking breakdown for us. So this is where I talked a little bit about 288 out of 440 provided for the apartments, which is just under 1 unit, or excuse me, 1 space per bedroom. And the townhomes do have almost 2 units per bedroom. In total, it is still under the current code requirements. Conceptual elevations have been provided. Staff would note no signage plans have been submitted at this time. However, they do indicate a roof sign on the building. Current code requirements do not allow roof signs in the city, so the applicant would need to request a base standard modification as part of the SIP if they wish to utilize that roof sign, and this Plan Commission and Council would ultimately have to approve that base standard to allow it. And some more kind of concept renderings of what the development could look like. So the applicant has provided these conceptual elevations for the multifamily. They appear to be a mixture of kind of composite siding, metal siding, masonry, and windows. We have not been given specifics on the materials or the breakdown of those materials to weigh in on whether or not it would meet the current code requirements. We would note that this development falls within the Riverfront Overlay District, which has some specific design standards that go along with it. The applicant will need to address those standards as they undergo the SIP process. So with that being said, staff does recommend approval with a couple of conditions noted. First, that waterfront setbacks will either need to meet or a base standard modification sought during the SIP process for setbacks, and that the final access drive layout will need to be addressed as part of the SIP, and that's where we talked about kind of maybe narrowing up that driveway to match closer with Minnesota Street and likely removing one of those access drives along Iowa just to meet our spacing requirements. If they can't meet them and they want to seek an access control variance, that could be an option. We'd have to have further discussion on what the merits are for that access control variance.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions from the commission. David?
2, in the narrative, there was mention of line of sight or the ability to waterfront view. But do we have sight lines? The genesis of that question is, it just seems that we're butting all these apartments to the river as opposed to laying them rotating at 90 degrees. Are we maximizing the use of the riverfront and the development?
We'll defer that question to.
So that, I'll leave that, the rest of the editorial. The other is there was something about capping, I'm guessing that there's impacted soils and stuff like that underneath. What does that have, if any, effect on the development of this property?
Both those questions we'll defer to the applicant to address further.
Other technical questions?
Oh, yeah, one.
Go ahead, Dave.
Is this in a TIF district?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
29, I believe.
All right, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today?
Hi there. My name is Sarah Stickert, and I live at 416 West Fifth Avenue. And what hasn't ever been mentioned in the plan and that stuff is that how this is going to impact the people who live on Fifth Avenue. We're concerned that there's going to be an increase of traffic. Right now, our street is very quiet, but since the Geldwen factory closed, it's been very, very quiet. But we're concerned that with all of these buildings and that stuff going up, that there's going to be people racing up and down our street, which we already kind of have a problem with sometimes. I also have a question about the proposed siding of it. I don't know if you're trying to make it look like the old factory or whatever, but I personally think it's ugly. If you could make the siding fit in more with the 100-plus year homes that are around it, that would be helpful, sort of like Cape Cod siding or something like that, horizontal, vinyl siding. And I know that you've addressed that it's kind of close to the Riverwalk, and I'm a little concerned about that too. And also, I see that you want to make these 5 stories. Isn't that a little tall for this part of the city? There aren't any 5-story buildings on the south side of the city. We were wondering if you could reduce the height of it to fit in more with the neighborhood. And I just have one question. Did I see lights on top of the building? And where you showed the Morgan 1 sign and that stuff, which, do we really need a sign on top? Are those lights on top of the building?
No, they're just call-outs pointing
Okay,
to things on them.
okay. Because I just thought, whoa, that's going to really increase the light in our neighborhood. I guess that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Miss,
Excuse me.
Sarah?
I'm sorry.
A question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just, are you speaking for the neighborhood? You used the term "we," I think, a couple of times.
Actually, my housemate and I.
Oh, okay. All right, I just.
I'm sorry. But I don't think there's anybody else from our neighborhood here, which I'm a little disappointed about, because we did have discussions amongst the neighbors. But
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else here speak to this item today? Come on up, man.
Thanks. My name is Paulette Feld. I also live at 416 West Fifth. And yes, we did talk to neighbors about this across the street and some of the neighbors on our side of the street. And I just have a few more comments in addition to what Sarah shared. My first look at the drawings of the buildings reminded me of the old factory buildings in the city I grew up in. And as one of our neighbors said, the factory was torn down. Why are we building another building that looks like a factory? So I think one of the things that needs to be discussed is what this building is going to look like in relationship to the rest of the neighborhood. As Sarah said, our side of the street are houses that our house is over 100 years old. The rest of them are probably in that same age group. Across the street, we have 60-year-old houses. And so how will these 5-story buildings fit in with the rest of the neighborhood? The developer mentions how it's very similar to the Oshkosh Corporation headquarters that's going to be built. But my question is, where is that in relation to our neighborhood? Why are we making this building look like the Oshkosh Corporation building? The only time you're going to see the two in close proximity is if you're moving down the river pretty fast. So I think some work needs to be done on the style of the building. Other buildings on the south side of the river, right along the river, are also more traditional. If you look at the Chamber Building, if you look at the dental offices and the other buildings that have been built along the Riverwalk, none of them look like this. So I really think that's that needs to be, and I have the same issue with the signs on the roof, and I hope those do go away. What else? Excuse me. There is some questions about the impact on the neighborhood, whereas the city said that there wouldn't be any huge issues. The developer talks a lot about the impact on 6th Avenue, but hasn't talked about 5th Avenue at all. And I know it's an area a lot of people aren't familiar with. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood. We are a neighborhood of a lot of owner-occupied houses. We have 2 houses for sale on our block right now, on the 400 block. And we're hoping that this eminent development doesn't keep people who want to own a house, young families, that kind of thing, from coming to the neighborhood. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Our house has always had, even when the factory was there, a view of the downtown across the river. It's a beautiful view, and I think it's unfortunate that that view is going to be blocked by 5-story buildings. And I know we're not right on the river, and we didn't pay for the view when we bought our house. The factory was still there then, but I'd hate to lose that for the people who may live in our house in the future, as well as myself. The developer acknowledges the value of the view in terms of citing these apartment buildings. And I also recall a year or so ago when bridge designs were being developed for the new Oregon Jackson Street Bridge, that they were concerned that some of the structure of that bridge were going to hide the view for the apartment buildings. So it's important for them, but it's not important, apparently, to keep into consideration for the people who already live in the neighborhood. There's also a question about the increased usage of 5th Avenue. As Sarah pointed out, it's going to get a lot busier, most likely, with this development. I just want to make sure that everybody involved in this, the developer, the contractor, the subcontractors, know that the 400 block of 5th Avenue or 5th Avenue is not designated for large vehicles. It's got a weight limit on it because that block was not improved when the rest of 5th Avenue was done. So in the construction processes, no trucks can be using 5th Avenue, either in or out. And with the Iowa Street entrance so close to 5th, I think it would be possible that that would be something that they'd try to do. So we're also hoping that this development will speed the city up in finishing up 5th Avenue and doing our block, which is in great need of rebuilding our road. So that's all I have right now.
All right, thank you very much, Paulette. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Todd Paschke. I live at 432 Fifth. I guess my main concern is the increased traffic that's going to be, running up and down Fifth Street. I'm thinking about it, and I think there's some sort of a remedy to this. It would be nice once they're done with all this construction, if they want to use Fifth Street for bringing all their concrete trucks and all that, just run as much equipment in there as they want. But at the end, when they're done, I think they should have to pay for that, because that road is in tough shape from Michigan to Iowa. It's in tough shape now. So once they destroy it, then they should have to rebuild it, and that means redoing all our underground, sewage and all that stuff. And then that way, we're all somewhat sort of compensated for, the inconvenience of all the traffic and all the this, that, and all that stuff. I don't think that's an unfair request or nothing. I think at least we're getting something out of the deal.
Okay.
So
thank you, sir.
That's my thought, I guess.
All right.
So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Looks like the developers are here.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
I don't like hopping back and forth here, so had Darren not browbeaten me into sitting down for the first item tonight to make my peace with that one, I wouldn't be have done that. But I did want to cover a couple of the items that were discussed by a couple of the neighbors. I also want to introduce our architect here. Circling back, Mr. Chairman, Ed Bowen, 601 Oregon Street, on behalf of the developer. And I have to apologize. I didn't write down note by note the couple of concerns, but I do think, certainly loud and clear is the use of Fifth Avenue. I will say at current, while we have an eventual driveway shown running to the west, connecting with Fifth Ave, I think, Mark, I mentioned this to you earlier. We do plan on bringing our infrastructure largely in through that portion of it, because that's where a lot of the sewer and storm connects, and that's why that private drive is there largely. I don't believe that we plan on connecting that driveway and actually paving that driveway as part of the first phase until a little bit further down the line. We certainly don't anticipate Fifth Avenue coming off of Ohio to the east or anything along those lines to serve any sort of construction traffic. As far as we're concerned, the driveway onto 6th Avenue, I think, is our focal point, and I think you'll see the vast majority of passenger traffic using that driveway, and truck traffic, especially during construction. I don't think that they would use Fifth Avenue regardless, simply because there's really the work's going to be occurring in that first phase. It doesn't behoove them to use anything other than that driveway off of 6th, I don't think. So I don't anticipate construction traffic coming in off of Fifth Avenue or utilizing Fifth Avenue in any form or fashion. So in terms of the building design, I will say that the two-dimensional renderings that are shown as part of that don't do the building a lot of justice in terms of either the materials being used or the sort of the three-dimensionality of them, frankly. I think the renderings are going to do a much better job. The materials that were sort of concern are a very general, very sort of drawing only item. We've not finalized any materials. We anticipate using the requisite number of Class 1 materials as defined within the Riverfront Development Overlay District, and anticipate making those selections as we go further down the road to the SIP process. So I think we're going to look to the neighborhood around us to make sure that we are trying to speak to those varying architectural styles and things like that. With that said, this is a building that is being built in 2018. We are not trying to make it look like it was built in 1965, nor are we trying to make it look like it was built in 1865 either. So I think that this is, from an architectural standpoint, fairly in keeping with modern design. Joe can certainly speak to that in terms of his experience doing these types of projects in Milwaukee, Madison, and other areas where this type of design is becoming a little bit more prevalent. So, from a visibility standpoint, we think that we're probably maximizing the visual impact that the river has here, both for our development and in many cases, I think, off-site by orienting the buildings that we have sort of perpendicular to the river. If you look at Anthem across the river, for instance, 50% of those units have no view of the river. Our buildings will have
if not 100%, you'll have 90% of those units with views of the river. The townhouse units on the south side of the site will have a view corridor through these buildings to the river. Some of the houses on 6th and to some degree, some of the houses through there will have views through that would not otherwise occur if those buildings were being built parallel to the river as a big wall. The way that the river's buildings and Anthem on the other side of the river, I think have, Annex certainly doesn't have a lot of river views. So with that said, I think, that's in keeping with, I think, what we've been trying to do with this site. So I am more than happy to continue as we go through to the SIP process, talking about the drive aisles onto Iowa, is that Iowa?
Iowa.
I'm sorry, yeah, Iowa. So the drive aisles onto Iowa, Fifth Avenue, and how we can be as sensitive as possible there. We don't anticipate that being a major point of ingress egress. I think largely that drive aisle exists because so many of our utilities are coming from the end of Iowa down that road to be distributed throughout the rest of the site. So as we go forward with staff, we can continue to address that. I have no concerns over the a couple of conditions that are here, and we're very confident we're going to be able to get through them. That said, I'm going to turn this over to Joseph Lee with Joseph Lee Architects, Milwaukee, Madison, and let Joe give you a little bit more of a flavor for what we're working on here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Like I said, I'm Joe Lee with JLA Architects. I'll go over, Ed covered a little bit. I'll recap a little bit. I'll go over the master plan and our thoughts behind the laying out and the organization of the buildings, that kind of thing. Touch on the architecture a little bit, and then I'll also touch on some of the parking and what we're seeing in our developments of late. So over the past, 5 years, we've designed, we worked with a number of private developers and have designed over 7,000 units in Wisconsin. And so we've got a pretty good idea of the market and what's going on. And so we've been working with Ed and his group and trying to figure out the best way to design this site and then the buildings as well. And so on the site master plan, I don't know if my pointer is going to work on that LCD. No. So on the site master plan, we did organize the buildings and took the approach to connect with the existing neighborhood, as well as integrate and maximize access to the river, the major amenity on the site, obviously. Access and views to the river, not just for this parcel, but for the surrounding neighborhood as well. So that was a big driver of organizing these 4 buildings perpendicular to the river, so that not only can our residents have views and access to the river, but views and access to the surrounding community can be maintained as much as possible to the Fox River. So organization of the site, we have that main access there that you can see, and we have a common clubhouse and pool amenity for the residents. That'll be 2,000 to 3,000 square feet, which would include a clubhouse that can be leased or reserved by the residents, fitness room, leasing center, pool deck, that kind of stuff. That the program for that isn't necessarily set in stone yet, but it's a common amenity for the residents of that community. And placing it on the riverside made a lot of sense, to maximize that communal space. And flanking that pool deck there that you can see are 2 open spaces, so common open spaces for use of the residents, and even, I think, I haven't talked about this with Ed, but even the public could come and use those, even though it would be private open spaces. Just, again, access to that river is very important. And then orienting those 4 or 5-story buildings perpendicular opens up the view corridors, opens up access corridors for, again, the residents as well as the community as a whole, as well as creating, keeping some value with those townhomes, rotating those buildings 90 degrees, as Ed said, that creates a barrier from the river to the rest of the city. And we think, and it's very common riverfront development typology to organize buildings in this way. So that was what was driving that, and we think it's very successful. You'll have a really nice riverfront experience as well. We have units on the ground floor as well as on all the upper floors. I brought some renderings in addition to what you have. So. And again, so we're at the GDP phase, so we were welcome feedback on the architecture, but you're not approving it. This is the direction we're heading. Architecturally, we think it's appropriate, like as Ed alluded to, for a more contemporary, modern aesthetic. We wanted it to, the woman that spoke earlier said it reminded her of a factory. Great, that's what we were going for. We wanted a more modern, industrial aesthetic. So to be a building of our time, to have more of a unique neighborhood and a unique aesthetic that's not seen here in Oshkosh. So that's the character that we're going for. So some feedback on that would be good. These renderings, so we're in the GDP stage. They'll be refined. The building designs will be refined as we move into SIP. This is a view down that main access. At the very end, you can see a clubhouse. You can't see it too well from probably where you're sitting, but down here's a clubhouse. So views down to the river as you're coming in with the 2 buildings flanking you. So just one example of the access and the views to the river. Another one here is a view on the private street. You can see the river on the left here. This is on the private street looking east. And so you can see how the buildings relate to the street. They maintain that street edge, but they still allow view and access to the river. A couple of the last ones here will be from the river walk area. So this is just east of the clubhouse, which is right here, looking that way. So you can see units fronting the river on the ground floor, as well as these access, view and access corridors. Thanks, Ed. And then another one looking the other direction. So just to give you an idea of scale and how the building masses and forms, create the spaces that we're looking for. So, material-wise, as Ed had mentioned, we're looking at all, quality. I don't know if you call it Class A or Class 1 material. So, conceptually, masonry is this lighter material, and then the darker materials are a mix of composite siding or metal siding. And we're anticipating like an accent color, what you can see here. Signage, we are showing some either rooftop signage on the front or, high up on the wall. We thought that gives you another interesting architectural element and some uniqueness that kind of ties into that industrial. But again, it's all conceptual right now and looking for feedback, both in big picture and nitty-gritty details if you want. So, open for questions. Yes, sir.
The pool area, you're gonna have some kind of blockage for that, for the river walk, or one of the renderings showed it where it was a wall, or?
Yeah, there'll have to be some protection so people just can't wander in, whether it's a fence or it'd probably be a transparent fence so people sitting on the roof or on the pool deck can look out and still see the river.
Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I guess that would be more of a open view.
Yeah.
It looks like a concrete wall.
Yeah,
I don't think
it
it'd be a
does.
concrete wall.
No. The intention of that would be to have it be transparent.
I would just, go ahead, John.
Okay. Ed, actually, if you up to the microphone, because you're on the commission, so you dealt with this before. Am I reading?
But I'm not wearing that hat right now, so.
Yeah, right, but you have the knowledge in that brain. Maybe. Going back to when we went through with the old Miles Kimball, this correct me if I'm wrong, this is almost in that same idea with the open stairs and the open corners, and is that part of this process? Is
I
that
think,
actually kind of fitting into that?
Yeah, so I think the trends in architecture today, especially modern multifamily architecture, really are sort of hearkening back to a lot of sort of industrial touches from the turn of the century. I don't whether that's driven by projects that are occurring as adaptive reuses of those types of facilities, such as the Miles Kimball building, or ours, which is brand new, but maybe trying to achieve some of that aesthetic. I think there are sort of conceptual details from a design standpoint within that type of architecture that really lends itself well to, to the history of this area, to the functionality of these types of designs. We're not trying to build, we're not trying to build a Door County. We're not trying to build, things like that. We're trying to stay true to Oshkosh. We're trying to stay true to this site. Whether we like it or not, the history of Central City Oshkosh along the river tends to be an industrial history. So I think this design speaks to that to a large degree. But I think it tries to maintain some sensitivity and some relativity to the neighborhood around it. So I do think that there are a lot of similarities between the Miles Kimball adaptive reuse. There are similarities here to the Oshkosh Corp project, largely from a material sense and from a visibility sense. We didn't, if I mentioned Oshkosh Corp in the application, it was simply out of similar materials, similar products, things like that. We're not building that building here by any means. But there are certain aesthetic items that probably tie together through that. So I think that you're on it with that, is that there are some similarities in the way that design is trending today that harken back to that.
And I was going to say, for people to get a chance, I've seen this very close to this building in Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Madison, sometimes on a smaller scale, sometimes a larger scale, but this does.
And Joe probably designed a lot of them.
He probably did. It's a very.
Not in Minneapolis, that's fine.
It's very similar to that. And I just want to commend you for, I do like the orientation of the building because it does open it up to the river. It doesn't have the wall. And I go back to what we discussed in the workshop. There's a building where I grew up on the south side of Milwaukee that's been there since the 70s, and they oriented their building that way, and it just makes so much more sense in terms of maximizing the view for as many people as possible. Even if you don't have a straight up view of the water, you see the water. And this kind of orientation also, again, people driving by on 6th Avenue can see them. It just, to me, it integrates it better with the river and actually with the neighborhood south of the river.
I think, you're never going to check every box,
I understand.
right? You're never going to check every box. And part of the trickiness of encouraging high density in existing central city neighborhoods is one in which you're encouraging properties that aren't necessarily good brothers and sisters to sit next to each other. But I think we've tried to accomplish as many things as we can to be as sensitive to as many pieces of the surrounding neighborhood as we possibly can. Are we gonna check every box? Unfortunately, I don't think so. But we really have, I think the focus of you're pulling in off of 6th Avenue, the first thing that you're gonna see is sort of a view corridor to the river. That doesn't happen when you pull into some of the properties across the street. You see either your parking garage door or you see a big wall of windows. That's what you see. pulling into this property, I think you're gonna have a little bit of a different experience. I think it's a little bit more of an opportunity to maximize the asset that we have here and make it a sense of place on this site. So,
David, you had your hand up?
Yeah, a couple questions. What is I understand the maximizing the view of the river. What are the real line of sights as you, of the river, of the apartments as you go back?
What are the real line of sights?
are you David? Do you mean from Sixth, or are you?
No, from the apartments.
From one of these apartments here?
South. I'm skeptical that the amount of line of sight, and that has to do with the orientation.
David, you're talking about if you're sitting in a unit over here.
That's correct.
Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be fantastic. You get oblique views from this balcony. You're not going to see the bridge necessarily because this building will be blocking, but you get oblique views from this angle all the way to the 90 here. So you got a good 40-degree angle of the river.
So they're balcony views, not window views.
Well, yeah, they're windows too. They've got windows right here. So if you go to could you maybe switch to one of the floor plans? Maybe that's a better. So, oh, that's not going to work. So I was pointing to one of those corner balconies on the ends. So yeah, so right adjacent to that would be, a living room or a bedroom or both with windows that have that same orientation and that same angle of view.
And I think, actually, David, one thing to point out, if you look at that, so the bottom second in from the left side, a one bedroom, 736 square feet. If you look at the way these balconies are formed, you have an angularity to the balcony that will allow windows that kind of have a little bit more view from multiple planes, as opposed to just a flat, if you look at Anthem, for instance, it's one flat wall with flat windows. I think if you look at what we're sort of projecting here in these designs, is you have multiple surfaces with multiple angles that have windows. So you'll have a little bit of a varied view through that corridor compared to just what you would see out of a flat surface. And I guess the other sort of counter to that would be even if you have a 40-degree angle view of the river from 95% of the windows on the building, I think that's better. We feel, from a design sort of theme standpoint, we feel that that's better than 50% of your building having zero view of the water. So that's the reason that we propose to, a little bit of river is better than no river. I guess it's kind of where we went with that.
Yeah, and there's always that psychological effect that even though you don't have a unit that directly, that's right there, you're still, when you're back there, you have a unit on the river. That's that psychological effect.
In your narrative, there was some, I think, implication of impacted soils, or is that going to have? Is that in effect any impact on your development, or?
It has some impact. Yeah, it impacts, and I am not our resident soils geologist. Peter Lang is not here, and I'm not going to pretend to be Peter Lang. Peter would be able to probably have an hour and 45-minute conversation with you about this if you wanted to. What it does impact largely is the method for preparing our footings and foundations. Doing geopiers as opposed to pouring a regular foundation wall impact sort of how we construct the foundations. In terms of placement on the site, that dictates to some degree what places we need to put these, because there are certain points of the site that need to stay capped as part of our agreement with the DNR. Peter would be able to give you.
That was the question I had more than I understand that you need piles or the.
Yeah, there are some spots.
Equivalent to that.
And we have to avoid some of those spots, and there are some depths to the soil that we need to avoid. We also, even on places on this site where there are not environmentally impacted soils, you have water table challenges, you have just general fill over the course of a century or two that you have to be a little bit more cognizant of. So that did inform how we laid the site out in a meaningful way. So, from a detail standpoint, you and Peter can talk that through, but yes, suffice it to say that there are reasons for that.
The only, let me see, the type of materials and whatever that you're proposing, and because that has to come back, is there representative building someplace else that if we wanted to take a road trip or whatever, we could take a look at, just to get a better feel?
Yeah, I think when we workshopped it, I think Joe brought, you had a couple of boards of, I think it was 10 or 15 different projects.
Yeah.
And what we did during the workshop was sort of pick and choose a couple of the pieces that we really liked from each of those different things. There were certain things that Kathy liked that Steve didn't like. There were certain things that, we all had a consensus on, and certain things that we didn't have a consensus on. So that's why I think that there's still a little bit of, in the air nature to exactly what those final materials are. But yeah, once we start talking about what those are, Joe's portfolio is deep enough that I think there'll be things that we can point to and say, all right, this material was used in Middleton, this material was used, in Milwaukee or whatever it is. And yeah, you want to go on a field trip, I can get you as much detail as possible to look at stuff like that.
And the only other observation would be the white band, the way the windows are how that's addressed. To me, aesthetic, even if it, as a butt of a building looking at the river.
Down there, you mean?
No, but the vertical, the white band up, just how those are, aesthetically, that's somewhat of a minor.
Yeah, and I think, again, from a color standpoint, you're always gonna have a little bit of a challenge with, how colors render on renderings like this. You're not gonna get the truest form. Do I think it's gonna be quite that dark gray or black? I don't know. Is the brick gonna be quite that tan? Could it be more of a deeper cream? I don't know. So when we get down that road,
Yeah, we'll bring in
a sample board, we'll bring in a material board, all that sort of stuff, and we can have that stuff for you to look at.
Right, and there's quite a bit of refinement left.
Yeah.
Conceptually, we might want to detail this a little bit differently
And
as we move forward.
last would be, even though this is phased in, what I'm particularly concerned about are the amenities of when the commercial development is going to be. In particular, you had long talked about having a grocery store there, and I think that is really a linchpin not only to this development, but also to vitality of downtown Oshkosh, and I'm curious what the timeline is for that.
Yeah, the commercial point, really, the reason we're here with this portion of the development prior to anything else, this is really what the market will support at the moment. So we want to respond to what the demand in the market is as much as we possibly can. Believe me, if there was commercial demand for the space that we're reserving as commercial, we would be here pretty quickly with a plan for that as well. I do think we're making progress with a number of users for that portion right now. We've had some meetings over the last couple of months that have been more positive than they ever have been in the past about users interested in the corporate aspect of the site. So we certainly think that there's that opportunity, but we also think that
you know, it's time for something here, and, you know, we feel that this is the right project for the right time. But, you know, we've certainly reserved, as you see, we've reserved the bulk of this portion of it as the commercial space. We have this portion of it as commercial space as well. We have enough land reserved there that we can do a fairly sizable project. We have some plans showing up to a couple 100,000 square feet that we can do there with podium parking as well. So there's opportunity there. There's enough land left over, and we're certainly not foreclosing those types of opportunities by proceeding with a little bit of a different order than we had originally anticipated.
Any other questions for the petitioners, as long as they're here for us? Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else here to speak to this item today?
Thank you.
Okay, no one's here. The public comment is closed. Back to the commission.
Make the motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion on that motion. Go ahead, Tom.
So obviously my fellow plan commissioners know that I'm very cognizant to the public input on projects around the city, and yet you have to weigh that against what that land can or could become. As I look at what this land can or could become, residential development like this is the only suitable thing that really can fit on that property at this time. I mean, I work with the developer now. We build very small houses throughout this town, and we can barely do a two-bedroom for $120,000. We can't replicate what's on Fifth Street or any of those other small houses for money that people would pay for them. And at the same time, we also have to look at who we're trying to attract into this community, and the population that I apparently get along the least with. The millennials and centennials are loving this kind of stuff, and they're the future of the city. And so I will be voting in approval for this just because I can't see any other development that would be less detrimental to the area than this one is as it's proposed.
Thank you, sir. David.
You know, somewhat skeptically, I will support this also. I think that the points, by accident, this weekend I walked down Fifth Street because I didn't have access to the Riverwalk. And it's a lovely neighborhood. And I think that through traffic control, or whatever, that has, as we develop further, that the impact of that, not during construction, but post-construction, needs to be considered. And I think that at least when we look at the next phase, if there is no movement on the commercial or other, that we should consider tying that in, because I think that was really one of the big selling points when they initially announced this project, that there was going to be a grocery store and some other amenities. And this is the spot to put it in. I think long-term we should hold the developers to this, not to hold up this project, but when the next phase comes in, certainly that, to put that as part of the timeline.
Other thoughts or comments before we vote? Okay, call the roll, Mina.
Morsick.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Weigert.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
Mott.
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, our final business item tonight, a review of the 2018 Annual Action Plan of the Community Development Block Program, Grant Program, pardon me. Lean will be joining us for it.
I know. It'll be 7-0.
No, exactly. So we either put it on.
What's that?
Oh, my.
Hi there, David.
Tom. How much number of
Just
voters?
don't want to get caught.
I always forget.
Well, somebody did both.
No, it was 8. We had 8.
Seriously, speaking of force
Hey,
You don't use a
It
mouse.
was
Use this.
8-9.
Democracy.
Yeah, it was 9 when it was.
Was it 9 before?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to turn the technology over to Darlene here for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hmm.
As soon as I
There you
figure out how
go,
to
right here.
use it.
That goes forward.
Okay. The city's been notified that we will be receiving, excuse me, $815,000 in our 2018 Community Development Block Grant allocation. As such, we divide our allocation into 4 categories. One of them is Central City redevelopment. We use this for acquisition of slum and blight properties. And as a couple of anticipated projects under this category would be assisting a local nonprofit in the potential for a permanent homeless shelter. Some funds for additional slum and blight acquisition and demolition projects, and a possible assistance on a lead reduction project with a daycare. Housing rehab, this is our owner-occupied rehabilitation project. We spend a large amount of our allocations on this because it benefits low to moderate income families throughout the community. And here are some of the pictures of the houses that we've done in the past year, showing before and after. We do a lot of exterior because of curb appeal. Again, roofs, windows, doors, painting. We also do interior, as you can see, plumbing, electrical, basement. Another area is neighborhood initiatives. We haven't allocated anything out of the 2018 funds for this project. We have enough carryover from our 16 and 17 program that hasn't been completely used yet. So we have enough funds there that we didn't allocate anything for this year. And we use that for the acquisition of slum and blight as well. And then public services. This is the nonprofit organizations and agencies that provide direct services to low to moderate income clients, like the day-by-day warming shelter, the community pantry, literacy council, Christine Ann, Tri-County Dental, Clarity Care. So there are a variety of non-public service agencies that we assist. It's not a lot of funding, but they're happy to get as much funding as we can provide. And then we have administration and planning costs. We're looking at $72,000 for salaries, training, and consultants. Our analysis of impediments is due this next year in 19, so we need to start working on that. So we have enough funds to pay for direct salary for those associated with the program. And then we also have funding for the Fair Housing Council of Northeast Wisconsin. They assist the city with our enforcing our fair housing ordinance. They take all our complaints and they offer training for landlords and tenants in the community as well. So the Plan Commission needs to make a determination of consistency that our proposed 2018 plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, official maps, and other planned activities for the city. Then we'll be going to council next week for their action, and we need to submit to the Department of Housing and Urban Development by the end of the month.
Okay, questions for Darlene? Go ahead, David.
Of course.
Thank you for that warm reception. When you're looking at neighborhood blight,
Yes.
do you concentrate on one neighborhood, sort of one neighborhood at a time, or look throughout the community? How do you arrange your focus?
We have been focusing on neighborhoods that have approved neighborhood associations in them. But sometimes a property will come up that really needs to be addressed in other areas, so but we try and look at the neighborhoods first.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions or comments for Darlene? Anyone here from the public to speak to her today? Anyone have questions about her work? Go ahead.
Yes, real quick, the lead program.
Yes.
How great is the need for that right now? Here.
What are you referring to, the lead?
Lead pipe, is that what I heard there?
The lead pipe program, that is a different program offered by the Public Works Department.
Okay.
However, when we are doing our housing rehab projects, if there is lead, we have been working with Public Works and getting those replaced at the same time we're doing our rehab.
Anything else for Darlene? All right, I think we're looking for a motion to.
Motion to approve.
It's consistent with the comprehensive
yes.
plan.
Mhm. Yep.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, could you call the roll one more time?
Orsick,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Harry,
Abstain.
Mott,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Great, motion carried 7-1.
7-0.
7-0-1.
All right, anything else for us, gentlemen?
Real briefly, we can adjourn.
Oh, we can adjourn first. Sorry.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Going forward, we just.